crimers, true crimers, true crimers, true crimers, true crimers. It is me, Dark Angel ASMR, and today I am back with another case. Today's case is going to be the case of BTK, aka Dennis Rader. Now, if you are looking for more ASMR content from me, I do have my original ASMR channel that I created before creating this channel, just specifying in true crime, and that is always linked down below in the description. And also, my script and my notes are going to be on this side of the screen, which is why I'll be looking over there quite a bit. But without further ado, excuse me, let's just get started. So, on January 15th, 1974, on a cold winter day, 15-year-old Charlie Otero began his afternoon walk home from school. Charlie, his parents, and 4 siblings recently moved into a house at 803 North Edgemore Street in a quiet, peaceful suburb. Charlie, happy that another school day was over, carefully walked down the side road to his home. Nothing seemed unusual when he opened the front door and entered his living room. He shouted out to anyone in the home, but there was no answer. The dog didn't even bark. Such silence was extremely unusual. Charlie walked into his parents' bedroom a little afraid. Charlie's father, Joseph, 38, was lying face down at the foot of the bed, his wrists and ankles bound. His mother, Julie, 34, was lying on the bed, similarly bound. For a few seconds, Charlie couldn't move. He didn't know what to do. Moments later, his senses returned to him, and he ran outside urgently to get help for his parents, not realizing that he had only experienced part of the horror that was in his home. A neighbor who came to the house to help noticed that when he tried to call the police, the phone lines were down. When the police searched the house, they were shocked to find 9-year-old Joseph II in his bedroom at the foot of his bed, face down on the floor. His wrists and ankles were also bound, the only difference being that he had a hood over his head. And according to one reporter, he had 3 hoods over his head. But the worst had yet to come. Down in the basement, Charlie's 11-year-old sister, Josephine, was found hanging from a pipe around her neck. She was partially naked, only wearing a sweatshirt and socks. Investigators were stunned by this execution-like multiple murder in broad daylight in such a peaceful area. Since the beginning of the case, police had been very careful not to release details about the murders. They said all 4 victims were strangled with a cord and cut through and blindfolded. There were no such wires in the house, so the killer had brought all of the ropes, hoods, duct tape, wire cutters, and possibly a gun. According to Captain Paul Dodson of the Wichita Police Department, semen was found throughout the house, and it appeared that the killer masturbated over some of the victims, although no one was assayed. Jose Otero's watch was lost and never found. Other than Julie Otero's bag and missing watch, there were no real signs of forced entry, robbery, or even a struggle. The coroner stated that all 4 murders occurred well before noon and most likely Police said that while Joseph Otero was driving the 3 older children to school, the killer entered the house where Julie and her 2 younger children were alone. After the killer captured and bound the 3, he waited for Joseph to come home to take the 2 younger children to school and surprised him. Someone had put the Otero's notoriously loud dog out behind the house. It is then believed that the killer hung around for about an hour and a half and then took the Otero family's car and parked it near a grocery store. Otero's neighbors probably spotted a dark-skinned man leaving the Otero's home in the car. At first, the police wondered who the Oteros were and why they had been chosen. Several things hinted at motives, but nothing definitive. Joseph Otero was born in Puerto Rico and began his career in the military after moving to the United States. Shortly before his death, he retired from the Air Force, where he was a flight instructor and a mechanic. He was physically very fit and an excellent boxer. He was liked by his colleagues, and no one could tell the motive of his murder. A similar report came back regarding Julie. She was recently caught up in a downsizing, but would be rehired when the business got back its footing. She was also a kind person and a very good mother by all reports. Like her husband, she was highly skilled in self-defense. The Otero children were very well behaved at school and liked by those who knew them. They also adopted the family sport of judo and were clearly above average in this. This perfectly planned and organized attack required control, perfect timing, and the ability to subdue a group of people who were usually more than capable of defending themselves. It had the makings of a military operation, but then there were also murky details that the police did not release to the public. Excuse me. Police Chief Floyd Hannon told the Wichita Eagle in January of 1974 that how the family members were killed shows an obsession from the attacker. In October 1974, just 9 months after the murders of the Otero family, Don Granger of the Wichita Eagle received an anonymous phone call, allegedly from the Otero killer. The caller directed him to a mechanical engineering textbook at the Wichita Public Library. Granger found a letter inside the book claiming that the writer was responsible for the Otero murders and promised more victims. The authenticity of this letter was not doubted because it contained details only known to the police and the killer. The letter was addressed to the Secret Witness Program, which allowed people with information about a crime to report it to police through a newspaper and remain anonymous. Investigators immediately asked that the letter be withheld from the public to avoid any false testimonies or widespread panic. The Wichita Eagle complied with the police request. However, Kathy Henkel, editor of the 2-month rival newspaper, the Wichita Sun, obtained a copy of the letter and printed part of it in an article that she wrote on December 11th, 1974. suspects you have in custody are just talking to get publicity for the Otero murders. They know nothing at all. I did it by myself with no one's help. There has been no talk either. Let's put this straight," unquote. The killer then provides details of the crimes and crime scenes that were not published. Quote, "I'm sorry this happened to society. They were the ones who always suffer most. It is hard to control myself. You probably call me psychotic with SA perversion. When this monster enters my brain, I will never know. But it is here to stay. How does one cure himself? If you ask for help that you have killed 4 people, they will laugh or hit the panic button and call the cops. I can't stop it, so the monster goes on and hurts me as well as society. Society can be thankful that there are ways for people like me to relieve themselves at times by daydreams of some victims being tortured and being mine. It is a big, complicated game, my friend, of the monster plays, putting victims' numbers down, following them, checking up on them, waiting in the dark, waiting, The pressure is great, and sometimes he runs the game to his liking. Maybe you can stop him. I cannot. He has already chosen his next victim or victims. I don't know who they are yet. The next day after I read the paper, I will know, but it too late. Good luck hunting. Yours truly, guiltily." Although the letter was unsigned, it contained this postscript, quote, "P.S. Since SA criminals do not change their MO, or by nature cannot do so, I will not change mine. The code word for me will be bind them, torture them, kill them. BTK. You see," he added again. "They will be on the next victim," unquote. Despite some feeble attempts, BTK seems to have bad English, but in fact he is very well educated and spells pretty well when he's not trying to mislead the audience. He has no problems with words like psychotic, complicated, or perversion. He also read quite a lot about the psychology of that era. The famous letters of the California Zodiac Killer and Jack the Ripper were known from newspapers and books. Interestingly, Zodiac began his killing spree on October 30th, 1966, and wrote his first letter to police almost a month later on November 29th, 1966. Even more interestingly, after 3 years of silence, Zodiac sent his second letter. It is possible that BTK read about this and decided to open lines of communication with the media and with the police. Kathryn Bright of the Wichita Eagle reports that on April 4th, 1974, the Wichita Eagle reported that on April 4th, 1974, just 3 months after the Otero murder, Kathryn Bright, 20, and her brother Kevin, 19, went to their home at 3217 East 13th Street around 1 p.m. Little did they know an intruder hid in their home and waited for them to return. The intruder told them he needed money and a car to escape from the California police. At gunpoint, Kevin was forced to tie his sister to a distressing sounds coming from the room next to him after this, from his sister. Kevin managed to escape and get help for his sister, but she unfortunately passed away 5 hours after being taken to the hospital from 3 stab wounds to her abdomen. The police also noted that Kathryn was partially undressed and had obvious bandages around her neck. Kevin helped the police sketch the intruder, but he still was not identified. The police did not link BTK with this crime at the time. 3 years later, on March 17, 1977, Wichita police were dispatched to 1311 South Hydraulic Street. Upon arrival, police entered the home and found 26-year-old Shirley Vian dead. She was lying on her bed, partially undressed, her hands and feet tied, and a plastic bag over her head. While removing the bag, investigators noticed a BTK identification cord wrapped tightly around her neck. An armed intruder locked Shirley's 3 children in the closet. The children eventually managed to free themselves and call the police. Again, investigators believed that this crime was also premeditated. The incident happened during the day, and there were no signs of forced entry. The killer stopped one of the victim's boys on the street earlier that morning and showed him photos of a woman and child who claimed they were looking for a way to get home, and that is how he got information on the family. The city of Wichita was in a dark panic. Hundreds of people who came home in the evening regularly checked if their phone lines were down. Workers rushed home and locked their doors. BTK quickly became a ghost story told to newcomers at parties and bars. On December 8th, 1977, BTK actually called 911 and said, "Go to this address. You will find a murder. Nancy Fox." Investigators were quickly able to trace the call to a downtown phone booth, where witnesses vaguely remembered a 6-foot-tall man using the phone moments earlier. Unfortunately, the quality of the recording camera on this phone booth was too poor for the investigators to do any kind of analysis. Acting on the caller's instructions, police responded to 843 Perishing Street. Upon arrival, investigators immediately noticed that a window had been broken, allowing entry into the home. Upon entering the apartment building, police found 25-year-old Nancy Jo Fox dead in her bathroom, with a nylon stocking wrapped around her neck. Unlike previous victims, she was fully clothed. Fox's driver's license was missing from the scene. Again, investigators say the killer took the license as a token of the crime. The murder took place at night. Semen was found at the scene, but an autopsy later revealed that Fox had not been SA'd. As abruptly as they started, the killings appeared to have ended in 1977. It seemed as though BTK had vanished, or had he? Distraught at the lack of publicity, BTK wrote another letter on February 10th, 1978, to a local station. He wrote, "How many do I have to kill before I get my name in the paper or some national He also warned that he had chosen his next victim. And as of March 2004, the last confirmed case of BTK was on April 28, 1979, when he waited outside a house in the 600th block of South Pinecrest for the 63-year-old owner to come home. When she did not show up, BTK got angry and sent him a letter. "Be glad you weren't there," he wrote, "because I was." The BTK investigation was dormant throughout most of the early 1980s, with no new leads or tips. In 1991, the Wichita Police Department assembled a cold case team after police received a new lead in the BTK murders. Although the lead turned out to be false, Captain Paul Dodson did not reveal the nature of the lead. He's quoted as saying, "I think he's probably still in the community." In 1997, BTK was profiled by Robert Ressler, a former FBI veteran who actually coined the term serial killer. Ressler said that he believed the man was to be a graduate student or professor of criminal justice in Kansas. He also believed him to be in his mid-20s at the time of the murders and an avid reader of books and newspaper articles. Since his habits had not been seen in Wichita since the 1970s, Ressler theorized that he went out of the area, died, or was in prison or an asylum. On Monday, February 28, 2004, a shocking update seemingly out of nowhere was released by police. Law enforcement in Wichita claimed that they were 99.9% sure that the suspect that they had in custody, 59-year-old Dennis Rader, was the BTK killer. But while the tone of the news conference was confident, few details of the investigation were divulged at that time. After 31 years, the identity of Wichita's most notorious serial killer was revealed following the arrest of the suspect, Dennis L. Rader. After he was stopped at a traffic light on East Keechee Road near his home. The question on everyone's lips right now was, who is Dennis Rader? Relatively little was known about him at the time, but now we have a lot more information. Rader was born in 1945 and grew up in Wichita with 3 brothers, all of whom graduated from Heights High School in Wichita. Rader was in the Vietnam Air Force from 1965 to 1969. BTK victim Joseph Otero was also in the Air Force at the same time. Rader worked in the meat department of a Park City grocery store from 1971 to 1973, and then as an assembler at the Coleman Camping Equipment Company, where he met 2 of his earlier victims. He worked for ADT Security from 1974 and 1989. In 1989, he also worked for the U.S. Census Bureau, collecting information from door to door. Working in both positions, the security and the census, Rader gained access and information into the homes of many residents in the area. It is believed that he initially met most of his victims while at work. He attended Wichita State University, graduating in 1979 with a degree in legal administration. According to Fox News, Rader never became an officer, but instead went into code enforcement, or what one critic called a glorified dog walker. In his spare time, Rader also led a scout group and was active in his church. No one believed that he could harm anyone. Many called him the type of person who was not particularly remarkable, who never stood out from the crowd. His ability to blend in allowed him to go unnoticed for so many years. Now, how was the infamous BTK killer caught? In letters to the police after his killings, Rader asked if it would be possible to trace his writings if they were put on a floppy disk. Police answered this question in a newspaper ad published in the Wichita Eagle, saying that floppy disks were safe to use. On February 16th, Rader sent a purple 1.44 megabyte disk to Fox affiliate KSAS TV in Wichita. There was also a letter, a gold-colored necklace with a large pocket, and a copy of the driver's license of one of his earlier victims. The metadata of the floppy disk contained the words Christ Lutheran Church and Dennis as the last person who modified the document. An internet search revealed that Dennis Rader was the chairman of a church council. When investigators drove by Rader's house, a black Jeep Cherokee, a vehicle seen on Home Depot surveillance footage after the murders, was parked outside. That was strong circumstantial evidence against Rader, but they needed more evidence to actually arrest him. Police obtained permission to test a pap smear from his daughter. DNA tests showed a familial match between the test and a nail sample that was under the fingernails of one of the victims of the murder scene. Once this match was confirmed, it was enough for police to arrest Rader. On August 18th, 2004, family members of the victims bravely stood before the man who murdered their loved ones and told him for the first time what they thought of him and his terrible actions in court. Rader was reportedly and repeatedly called a monster and a coward by most members, who asked the judge for the harshest sentence possible. Some family members were so overcome with emotion that they could not say anything. Rader's evil was truly beyond words. During all of this, Rader showed no signs of emotion, occasionally wiping his eyes, acting distressed at the scene. Many people wondered why he had not shown such remorse for murdering innocent people. After the court heard from family members, Rader took the stand and made a rambling 20-minute statement that District Attorney Nola Folston later compared to a speech at an award ceremony. Rader said what he did was selfish and narcissistic. He also tearfully many of them did not hear Rader's entire ramblings because they stood up and left the courtroom moments after he began speaking. In Rader's last battle for power and control, he listed a series of complaints he had about alleged mistakes the DA and investigators made in filing his case. It was clear during Rader's remarks that he enjoyed this attention. At the end of his speech, Rader offered a brief apology to the victims' families and cried, quote-unquote, crocodile tears, because it was clear he had no real remorse for the victims nor their families. He also asked that Judge Walker consider the harshest possible sentence. The victims requested that the judge also place additional restrictions on him, including restrictions preventing him from having access to any images of people or animals in prison correspondence, because they feared that this would fuel his perverted fantasies. Rader's long-awaited trial finally began, and afterwards, Judge Walker sentenced him to a total of 175 years. It was the most severe sentence he could impose on Rader under Kansas state law. So that is the story of BTK, or Dennis Rader. There are a lot more details to this case. If you would like to go do more, extra research, on your own. But what I found particularly interesting about this case was how he actually stopped killing for more than 20 years before he got caught, which you virtually never see. Like I said, the FBI agent who coined the term serial killer and basically created criminal profiling, said that he either had to be dead, in prison, moved away, or in an asylum. Typically, killers do not stop. So this was extremely interesting to see, in like a psychology standpoint. It is speculated that perhaps his wife may have started to suspect him, and he just had to stop for that sake. Or maybe it was that his children were getting older and he didn't have as many opportunities or free time or what have you. It could be literally anything, but it's just so incredibly interesting, again, like psychology-wise, that he stopped, just cold turkey stopped. But anyway, I hope that you guys enjoyed tonight's case. Like I said, I personally found it super interesting. And as always, if you have any case recommendations, please leave them in the comment section